Ready.
Good evening. Welcome to the Morrison County Board of Adjustment public hearing for March 19th, 2024. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I have a few items to cover before we get started. Please sign in at the door if you have not already done so. There you'll also find a detailed handle of the step-by-step procedure we will follow tonight if you wish to take one. Please put any electronic devices on silent mode at this time. Also, please note that all testimony is being recorded for the record. Members of the Board of Adjustment are appointed by the County Board of Commissioners with one member from each of the 5 commissioner districts. Land Services staff is here to assist the Board of Adjustment with its duties. The task of the board is to consider requests for variances and appeals from an order, requirement, or decision made by county zoning official in accordance with the state law and county ordinance. Each request is considered on its own merit. The burden of proving a practical difficulty rests with the applicant. If a variance is granted, it is granted to the land, not to the landowner. There is a protocol for how we will proceed tonight. For each variance request on the agenda, we will hear a staff report, testimony from the applicants, and then the board will discuss and gather more information as needed. Next, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak to the request. I will ask each party to come to the podium, state their name and address for the record, give their testimony. Please be as factual as possible and direct all statements and questions to me. After all testimony is complete, I will close the public hearing portion of the process. The board will then review and discuss the case in terms of our finding of fact criteria as required by Minnesota statute and county ordinance. We'll have a series of votes, discuss whether conditions be made, and have a final motion to approve or deny the request based on those findings. After this final vote on your request, you may leave if you wish. We have 2 items on the agenda. The first applicant is Deborah and William Chamberlain, 9385 Rosehaven Boulevard, Little Falls, Minnesota. Application for a variance to replace and expand a non-conforming deck with a screen porch to be over an impervious surface located Lot 6, Block 1 of Rosehaven, Section 6, Township 39, Range 32, Bellevue Township. Applicants, can you please step forward and have a chair at the table, and then state your name for the record.
William Chamberlain.
Deborah Chamberlain.
Thank you. Ms. Amy, will you please provide the staff report and any comments?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Again, this is a variance request to expand a non-conforming structure and exceed allowable impervious surface. This property is located in Section 6 of Bellevue Township. The ordinance references for this are the Mississippi Headwaters Board Standard F1, and then under F1D, and then V2D. Here's a plat map of Bellevue Township, and the red dot is the location of the parcel. And then here's the variance request received from the applicant. And then a site drawing also provided by the applicant. And then here are site photos submitted by the applicant with the application. Here's an aerial photograph of the parcel, and then also some oblique imagery of the property as well. And then here are site photographs taken at the viewing on the 15th of March. This property is on the Mississippi River under Mississippi Headwaters Board jurisdiction. The property is a non-conforming single lot, which means it's less than 5 acres and 333 feet wide. And the property is 80 feet wide and 12,800 square feet. The property is within the Rosehaven subdivision, and that was established in 1960. The Mississippi Headwaters Board regulations went into effect in 1981. According to the assessor's records, the original home was built in 1941. The permitting of the property includes the following. In June of 1994, an after-the-fact permit for a 12 by 16 deck on the riverside. September of 1994, a variance to place a garage 37 feet from the center line of the township road and 80 feet from the ordinary high water mark of the Mississippi River. And then in July 2007, a variance to remove the existing deck and portions of the house and replace with all living quarters and place a roof over the existing front deck located in the shore impact zone of the Mississippi River, with the caveat that the roof line could not change in height or direction. And this is the site drawing that was provided with that variance request. The current dwelling is 75 feet from the river, and the deck is 65 feet from the river. Both are within the shore impact zone, according to the Morrison County Land Use Control Ordinance. And this is where I'm going to highlight a difference. The Mississippi Headwaters Board Comprehensive Plan calls for the stricter of their plan or the ordinance to prevail. In this case, the shore impact zone is the first 100 feet from the river in ordinance compared to the first 75 feet within the Mississippi Headwaters Board comp plan. In both cases, the deck is within the shore impact zone. A building envelope does not exist on this property. A 150-foot structure setback is required, and as you can see, that's about as deep as the lot. The applicant purchased the property in 2021 and is requesting a variance to replace the existing deck with the same dimensions but shift it 10 feet north. The applicant also proposes enclosing the area below the entire deck with screened walls. The existing impervious surface calculation is 26.1%, and the additional deck square footage, the deck square footage is going to stay the same now because there was a change in the application. So the impervious surface isn't going to change, it's going to stay at 26. However, 25% impervious surface is allowed. And so here's the impervious surface calc. So 2 variances are needed for this project. One is to expand a non-conforming structure. That still applies even though the deck size is not changing because they're asking to screen in the lower portion of it. And then also to exceed the allowable impervious surface. The applicant did attend a development review team meeting, and those notes were included in your packet. The property owner engaged the services of the Morrison County Soil and Water Conservation District and has submitted a buffer planting plan as part of their application. And then here is that plan. So the applicable comprehensive land use plan goals is natural resources and open spaces, goal C2, shoreline development, goal D1. And then the applicable comprehensive water plan goals and objectives is the surface water goal, objective B, land use and development goal, objectives B and D. 55 notices were sent and no comment was received prior to the hearing. And then here are your finding of fact and decision questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Applicants, anything to add?
No, I think you captured it. I know the original application I sent in, we had thought we needed to expand the deck size. We are now keeping it exactly the same size. We're just shifting it 3 feet to the north. And then with the landscape change, we're actually reducing the impervious by about 8 square foot. So we're gonna, clean that up a little bit and have minimal impact. And basically the screened in was just gonna be a basic screened in area so we can be out at night and not have the mosquitoes carry us away, so to speak. So that's all.
All right, thank you. Open it up to board questions, comments.
Mr. Chair,
Marv?
as board members are aware of this, and the rest of you probably aren't,
That was my brother's home, and my daughters used to rent it from him, so I'm very familiar with this property. And there were some, looked like drain tile there, if you wanted to look at the pictures there. I contacted my brother about this. I says, what is this about? If anybody had any question regarding that. And he had said, when the house was, the addition that was put on, that was approved and everything else, he went to Land Services and he had asked if it'd be okay to put drain tile around the footings of the home, around the block, and he said absolutely. So that's what that's from. So it is getting filtered near the home for that. And then another comment he had mentioned, I had mentioned that the Chamberlains wanted to put some steps on. He said the existing deck that was there, and I know this is numerous years ago, did have steps going down to the river, which I believe you have that right to do that, access it. But anyhow, they were facing towards the river, and what the Chamberlains are proposing to shifting the deck, and rather than a large number of steps coming right down to the river, they're shifting it over, which would be, according to the picture, to the left there, and removing some of that impervious surface, which would help in matters with that. That's all I have, I believe, at this time here, and just wanted, another thing, we looked at that riverside there, and we talked about, doing something. There's no erosion, and I think they were open to doing a no-mow or whatever, leaving the grass a little taller, but there's absolutely no erosion, and they were talking about possibly doing some type of planting. If you till that up, I think if you get any heavy rains, you're really opening yourself up for some problems, erosion issues there. But if you were to plant a shrub or two or three there, and you would just dig a small hole and put it in there, I think that would help prevent any issues in the future there. And at this point, I think that's it, because that's all I can remember at this time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Clint?
Okay. So we look at this property, there is no building envelope on it, as far as meeting setbacks from the river, okay? The whole property's built on with no building envelope. So we could look at it that it's already overdeveloped. It's done in a nice way. Everything's neat and clean around there. The impervious surface is over, a little bit. We will be taking away just a tick of impervious surface if you would do this and redo that coming down to the water there, or coming off of the steps and coming around to get to the grass. But then we got to remember when you put the steps on there, that's impervious surface too. So that's going to eat up probably what you're taking away. So it's going to probably stay the same. Okay. So I guess where I'm getting at, when we look at this and we get behind the house below that deck, it's hard to gutter that. All that water stays in that portion. The rest of the house is guttered and it can be diverted the water away. But on the back side of the house, the river side of the house, that water's all kind of there and it's going to go towards the river. So I guess my question would be going into this is, can we get just a little more detail on what kind of like rain garden you were thinking about putting in, or, plants to slow that up? I know you talked about that, putting in plants to stop the water from getting to the river.
Are you talking along the rivers?
Yes.
Where you're talking?
Yes.
Yeah, I talked to, was it Soil and Water, and they gave us some, I'd like to not till it up, because then it's just, you're gonna, but we're talking about just adding some more of the deep-rooted grasses. They recommended prairie drop seed, little blue stem, porcupine grass. Those things, just incorporate that along the river just to kind of hold in that area would be what we would work with our existing landscaper that's going to do some of the other landscaping around the house.
Okay. So then there was talk if you were gonna screen in your porch, that you were gonna do something on the deck of the deck so that, you don't get rained on, when you're underneath there.
Sure.
So can you enlighten us a little bit on that plan?
I will try and actually have Doug Procott, our contractor's here, so if, he may be able to help answer some of that questions too, but we're trying to put in, and then I'm not exactly sure how those work, but they will, shed water so you can be underneath, but then they would be, I think they're guttered, and we'd move the water similar to what we do with the house.
Doug, could you come up and have a seat and state your name for the record, please?
Douglas Procott.
So Doug, could you please just maybe enlighten us a little bit on what the floor of that deck would be and underneath and how the water would get out of there and all that?
And so there's multiple ways to do it, but basically they're gonna, between your floor joists, they're gonna put some kind of a bladder system into it. And at that point in time, we'd run it into a gutter system, and then either we would drop that into something which we're gonna talk to somebody about, so it makes sense to drop that into a tank of some sort or whatever to reuse the water, or if it makes sense to run it into shrubbery or whatever the case was. But it would be something like that where it'd be, we can take a look and contain it and then run it into a contained area, which would be monitored or whatever the case would be, so. But
Okay. So here's some of the issues we'll have is, the whole thing is too close to the river to meet setbacks, okay? You're a lot farther back than most people that come in front of us, okay? But it's still too close to the river. And then if it would go through here, it still has to go to the Mississippi headwaters, okay? They still would have to approve this. So if it would go through, having some of them things in detail would, right? Or that don't matter, they just look at what we look at?
Yeah, Amy?
They're certainly going to want to know what, if any, stormwater practices are going to be implemented and if you're conditioning them to be as such. If they're not nailed down here, then we more than likely, if you're going to put a condition on there, we'd more than likely have it be where that plan would ultimately be approved by the Soil and Water Conservation District. So at least then it's reviewed by them for capacity and holding area. And I would not anticipate the Mississippi Headwaters Board would get into the weeds if they knew that the condition was thoughtfully put together where there was some oversight to make sure that whatever is implemented is going to be effective.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is if, when we vote and stuff, and it just depends how we get through this on how we're gonna go, one of the conditions I'd probably put on this would be that you would have a water plan for that water, and exactly what you would do with that, and work with Soil and Water. Like Amy stated, have that approved by Soil and Water, and then you'd have to stick to that, because that'd be one of the conditions if this would go forward. And then you would have that once you get to the Mississippi Headwaters Board also. So if you guys would agree to that, that would be a condition that would be fine with you guys.
That would be fine.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. So, Marv had said that there was drain tile. I just thinking, if there's drain tile on the bottom of that footing that ties up and it goes off onto the edge of the water, I wonder if we could tie into that, or it would, have you guys ever experienced
That would probably have to be
soil and water?
proof through Soil and Water. We don't.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's fine,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'll say they're going to look for practices that don't outlet it directly right to the river. They're going to, it's preferred to see where you're working with the landscape to have that water go down instead of across or go straight to the river. So although drain tiling is okay, this water, they'd probably want to see slowed down, contained, either in your planting area by the stairs or in maybe even a swale with some water-loving plants or something like that. But that's something that soil and water can definitely help you with and help you size that appropriately.
Mr. Chair.
Marv?
Another thing to point out, and we're talking about this screened-in porch. Here, I forgot to mention, my brother said the old deck he did, when he replaced this, it was screened in. Granted, it's been years ago, and he didn't refinish it off like that. But as I thought about this too, and it concerns me that it would only be screened as some of these areas in time, once they're screened, they put up walls and it turns into addition. So I believe a condition needs to be put on this, that it's only as a screened-in area like that. And we were talking about impervious surface and all, and what would help the Mississippi Headwater Board digest or say approve this is if you look at this, when we remove that retaining wall that is by the steps there, there's basically no impervious surface between the house and the river. We don't see that. Usually you have something, sidewalks, you have people, little patios or whatever you have it. So with that being said, I think that would be a little piece that should be passed on to them.
Thanks, Marv.
Mr. Chair.
Clint?
Just one more thing, more of a comment. So, they can rebuild their deck because it's there. He's proposing to move it over so he could put steps down, okay? When I look at that, to me, in my mind, this is just me speaking, it makes sense. It moves it so it's not in the middle of the window. It doesn't, to me, it don't really affect anything that was going on that property before the deck or after it would get moved, okay? So just one thing to think about, and I'm not saying that, but, a lot of times we get on these nonconformities and, the screened-in areas, that's going to be used a lot more. Is that considered more livable space? Just something to think about that way, that if you're using the property more, that's just something just to think about here before we move all the way through this process.
Mr. Chair, one more thing to add to that.
Yes.
These steps, I think, are a big safety piece. If you were ever to have a fire, where are you going to go if you're on the deck area like that? You would have a safe exit to leave that property. So it's also a safety piece here too.
Thank you, Marv. Amy, was there a picture up there that you could bring up that had the concrete under the deck? Mm-hmm. Or a picture of the concrete under the deck? So that does go all the way over, so you're chipping out some concrete as you're removing that impervious surface as the deck shifts over. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. The way I look at this is you already have everything approved through every other variance that you have. You're simply shifting the deck, you're taking out some landscaping, you're adding some stairs. That's pretty much offsetting for the most part. The underdecking or whatever you put on under there, it doesn't change your impervious surface. If you put a screened-in porch area on under there, still doesn't change your impervious surface. Now, when you start to put heaters and air conditioners and then start to enclose it, that's when people start to question and wonder if that's ever going to happen. So I understand that part of the condition. I don't know that it would be too necessary, but you got it on record. This is pretty straightforward, shifting a piece of the structure to the left as you're looking at it from the water, and that's pretty much it from my end. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to open this up to the audience for comment, either for or against. Please stand, state your name for the record, and then we'll hear from you. Any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? We will close this portion of the meeting to the public. Before we get to the voting sheets, anything else, Clint or Marv? Oh. Oh, yeah. I did forget that part. It was Marvin, Clint, myself, Amy, and Brent out for the viewing on March 15th at 1 o'clock.
Mr. Chair?
Clint?
Just one thing before we go through these questions, so we can think as we're answering these, I would like to add 2 conditions.
Okay?
And one would be that the water plan that is approved by Soil and Water be done for the water on that west side of that house that would go towards the river. That would be a condition, that'd have to be approved by Soil and Water, some kind of plan. And then the other one would be that the condition is the screened-in porch is stated that it's screened so that there's no glass. Wood walls get put up, things like that. So if we just state it, that the condition is it has to be screened. Okay. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you, Clint. All right, we will head over to the questions on the voting sheet. And question number 1 is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan. Marvin.
I believe it is by a few different things. Looking at it, what can you do on this piece of property to make it a better piece of property and not do any more erosion issues or anything to the river? They're basically not changing anything. They're actually making it smaller, lowering the impervious surface. They're willing to plant some shrubs, do some pieces to prevent erosion issues in the future. And then they're also adding where there is a safe access, second safe access out of that home in the event of an emergency fire. So I feel it's right in general purposes of the Morrison County Land Use Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you, Marv. Anything to add, Clint?
No.
Nothing from me. On to question 2. Is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? Clint.
I guess what Marv just answered for question 1, you could also use for question 2. One thing we're looking is they're not really adding any square footage other than the steps coming down. With the steps coming down, taking out some of the landscape there, it's kind of a wash on the impervious surface. Yes, it's very reasonable. They're not adding any square footage. Just want to shift it over. Just makes it a little more sensible, I believe. So that's really reasonable. And then having a stairway come down without adding a ton of impervious surface. I could see it's real reasonable to want to have a screened in area underneath there. And again, it's not adding anything else as far as impervious surface. I know we asked questions about the roof, or the floor, I should say, the deck, how we're going to get rid of that water. The only reason is because it just gets it kind of condensed a little more, but it's the same amount of water if that little under bladder is there or not. It's just how we control the water. So I do think that this is very reasonable.
Anything else? Okay. Question 3, will the issue of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? I'll take that one. You're moving a deck to the left, and it's going to look the same as it has the last couple of years, so there's not a lot of character change taking place there. Might be a different view for a minute or two, but that's it. Clint or Marv? Okay. Going on to question 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Marvin.
Well, this home was placed here, first built in 1961, before any of the Mississippi headwater rules were in it. So that was part of it. The other part is, there's no building envelope. And the way things are put on this here were done in a neat and a very fitting way. But you look back for the practical difficulty, I look at two things. When it was built at the time, before things were, ordinance were set up here by the headwaters, and no building envelope.
Thank you, Marv.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to add that, just correct, Marv was built in 1941, but it's very, very minimal change. It's just redesigning. So just wanted to add that into that.
Thank you, Clint. On to number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Clint.
Again, kind of what I just stated on the last question. It's such a minute and small change that's being done. It's more of a redesign. We're not adding any extra square footage or anything like that. So then when you put in what Marv stated for the practical difficulty, but also with, no building envelope, the deck was already there. It's just moving. Yes, the applicants want to move it, but when I looked at it, I guess when we were out there, me and John commented to each other that I wouldn't want that deck going right down the middle of a window. That's one of the things too. So I don't know. That's kind of my half-shifted answer for that.
Thank you, sir. Marv, anything?
Nope.
On to number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Can't say that it does. It's going to cost the homeowner more, and I don't think you're going to increase the resale value by moving it to the left that far. Well, maybe the window, but I can't comment on that right now. And it's just, again, for the record, working with the county on getting that buffer planting in place, and then a few ideas for some of that watershed, and stay away from the full walls, and I think that sounds good. So, any other comments, Ms. Amy?
Just one question before you vote. I know you had listed 2 conditions here. One was to have the Soil and Water Conservation District review and approve a plan for handling the water coming off the deck. And then also that the screened-in area, or the screened-in area be only screened. Are you also wanting to look at the condition that they implement the other planting plan on the bank of that the Soil and Water created for them, or not?
I guess my understanding was that when I said that would be part of it, if that's what Soil and Water, that would be included in the whole plan of what Soil and Water would tell them that they should do.
Okay. So
Because they're going to tell them to direct the water a certain way, and they're going to tell them to put these plants or a berm or something. I guess that's what I was looking at.
Okay, because Mr. Chair, this plan has already been submitted by Soil and Water for,
Okay.
Right on the bank, but then they may look at something else closer to that deck for containment of that. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear
Okay.
on what.
So they weren't one and the same, is what you're saying?
They may not be, they didn't address, here they weren't addressing the water. I suppose they could say, hey, what you have going on here would be adequate for the water. I mean, that certainly could be a conclusion they make too.
And I guess that's what I'd be fine with that. So that would be 3, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I brought up some concerns over that. My concern is if that gets tilled, worked up, or whatever done like that, I think we're opening ourselves up for some issues. But if they were recommending some shrubs, whether it be putting some deep-rooted plants, whatever like that, that was part of it. I'm open for that, but as working that up and possibly putting something larger, I think, knowing how that operated, I think it's creating some real, could possibly
Are
create some
you,
issue.
are you good with what Soil and Water recommends?
What the Soil and Water recommends doing to
Okay.
that property.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And the plan is part of your packet. If you look at your screen, this was included. This is what they have in mind as far as for the root structure that they're proposing. And then this was, so this has been designed by the Soil and Water Conservation District. Are you saying you're wanting them to do something else?
No, I was just
Okay.
concerned about, overdoing it and working it up and, so with a few shrubs or plant deep-rooted ones like that, I think that would take care.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so 3 total conditions. Do I have that right?
Yes.
3 total conditions, that's what we're voting on. Question number 1, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Marv?
Yes,
Clint?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Question 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted to land use ordinance? Clint?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Marv?
yes,
Question 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Myself is yes. Marv?
yes,
Clint?
Yes.
Question 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Marv?
yes,
Clint?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Question 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Clint?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Marv?
yes,
Question 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Myself is yes. Marv?
yes,
Clint?
Yes.
Based on the findings and the criteria as stated in Minnesota Statutes 394.27, oh, I'm sorry, that's for the motion. We have to do the
Mr.
vote.
Chair?
Yes.
I would make a motion that we approve this with the 3 conditions.
Okay.
and I'll second that.
Motion was made by Clint and seconded by Marv to approve with the conditions, the requested variance. All in favor, say aye. Marv?
Aye,
Clint?
Aye.
Myself is aye. You're up. Oh, there it is. Based on the findings and the criteria stated in Minnesota Statute 394, motion was made by Clint, seconded by Marvin to approve the requested variance. Your application has been approved, and you are now free to leave.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I didn't want to get, I know how that gets on the railroad. I think
All right.
it almost looked like they were till that up. I'll get it at some point,
Okay, the next applicant up is Alpha One LLC, Mark Urjevec, 31604 Lowery Circle, Cushing, Minnesota, 56443. This application is for a variance to expand a non-conforming structure and to be over an impervious surface located on Lot 23 of Elwood Acres, Section 28, Township 132, Range 31, Scandia Valley Township. Will the applicants please step forward and have a chair at the table, and then state your name for the record.
Good evening, I'm Mark Urjevec.
I'm Greg Habeisen.
Thank you, Miss Amy. Will you please provide the staff report?
Yes, I can, Mr. Chair. This is a variance to place a dwelling and deck within setback to the lake and exceed the allowable impervious surface. This property is located in Section 28 of Scandia Valley Township. The ordinance references for this request is 705.6 and 706.1. This is a plat map of Scandia Valley Township, and the red dot is the location of the parcel. And here's the variance request received by from the applicant. And then a site drawing also provided by the applicant. And here's an aerial photograph of the parcel. It's outlined in blue. And then here's some oblique imagery of the property as well. And then here's some site photographs taken at the viewing on the 15th of March. Again, the property is in Section 28 of Scandia Valley Township on Lake Alexander. The parcel is a non-conforming single lot size, which means it is less than 120 feet wide at the lake and 30,000 square feet in area. The parcel is 95 feet wide and 15,505 square feet. Up until 2022, a 1,284 square foot dwelling with a full basement below a portion of the dwelling existed on the property. It was located 53 feet from the lake with a deck over an enclosed porch 43 feet from the lake. It burned down in 2022. And here's what had been there. And then a view from the lake. And then this is the assessor's drawing on the layout. The applicant purchased the property in April of 2018. Per the Morrison County Land Use Control Ordinance and Minnesota statute, the property owner had up to 6 months to apply for a permit to replace the nonconforming structure. Since that was not done, the applicant no longer has a replacement right for the nonconformity, and the new structure must meet all setbacks. The applicant requests a variance to construct a new 1,400 square foot dwelling and a 672 square foot attached garage with a full basement beneath the entire structure. The proposed setback is 63 feet from the lake. The applicant also requests a variance to construct a 10 by 20 deck on the lake side of the dwelling, 53 feet from the lake. The proposed impervious surface calculation is 36.7%. That was without removal of the ramp that we had talked about. I do have an email from the applicant identifying that they would be willing to remove 937.5 square feet of that, and so that would bring the proposed impervious surface down to 30.6%. And then 25% impervious surface is allowed. Regardless of variance to exceed the allowable impervious surface, must also be granted for this project to proceed, even with that removal. The total gross living space within the previous dwelling was 2,138 square feet. The total gross living space proposed within the new dwelling is 4,144 for an increase of 2,006 square feet. The existing 24 by 24 detached garage would be removed to accommodate the new dwelling and attached garage. However, at the viewing, they had stated they may reuse that garage. An approximate 6,879 square foot building envelope does exist on the property. And here is a sketch of that. And the applicant did attend a development review team meeting, and here are the notes from that. And then they did provide a shoreline assessment worksheet. And then a temporary stormwater control plan and a permanent stormwater control plan. The applicable comprehensive land use plan goals is natural resources and open spaces, goal C2, shoreline development, goal D1. And then the comprehensive water plan goals and objectives is the surface water goal, objective B, land use and development goal, objectives B and D. 145 notices were sent regarding this item, and no comment was received prior to the hearing. And then here you're finding a fact and decision questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Applicants, anything to add?
No.
Okay. Open up the floor to the board members.
Mr. Chair,
Brent?
question for Amy or the applicants. I'm curious, when we were out there, you could see that there was a basement, there was some dugout, and in the staff report, there's indication that some of that or the burnt structure had a basement under it, other parts didn't. I'm looking at the assessor's office, and it kind of distinguishes where there might have been basement and wasn't basement, but just for clarification, because we are looking at, your request is for basement under the entire new plus under the garage. So I'm curious what was there before.
You want to answer that? Because I lived there.
Yeah, why don't you?
So that about half the house had a basement in it, 7.5 foot high. The other half was crawl space, probably about 4 feet high. The garage, of course, had nothing underneath it.
Okay, and looking at this diagram that's up there, which portion would have had basement and not?
The front half facing the lake.
Yeah, that section there. I would say it's the middle section.
Mr. Chair, when we look at these codes, the ONB is 1 story over basement, and then the 1 story no basement. So that's the differences that you see there. So about half of it had basement, half of it didn't.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair,
1 second, Marv. Just for the record, we did view this property on March 15th, right around, I just have to say March 15th, right? I don't have to list the time. I'm new at this. Go ahead, Marv.
oh, so is that where that 200 additional square feet came from, a living area? Because I was curious, why it was a cabin close to being the same size, and then you got now like 200 additional square feet of living space. I think, or was it 2,000? 2,000 square feet of additional living space. Just curious where that's coming from. Is it just because of the crawl space?
So I think that's the whole, what I'll call finished basement, if it was supposed to be finished, underneath the house and underneath the garage. I think the existing building, again, that's what we're really trying to do, is to replace the building that was there with a building of very similar size, perhaps even a little bit smaller. It's a 1-story building. Again, our neighbors have 2-story buildings.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So when you look at this, how it calculated is we've got, the 30 by 22 section that's got basement, so that square footage is times two. And then you have the 24 by 26, which is 1 level. And so that's how I come up with the gross living for there. Now, the whole thing will have a full basement underneath, including the garage. So that's why there's such a change in square footage, because it's times 2, the whole footprint times 2, because there's going to be a full basement below everything, including the garage.
Okay, that's where it comes from, because I said, okay, it wasn't much larger, and it's just like, how does this additional square footage come
Yeah.
into play?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Amy, could you pull up the building envelope?
Yep. I'm just going to find it.
So I'm trying to, as you look at that, can you see or can you tell where the septic actually starts?
Not from this drawing.
Okay.
I think the applicant could probably tell you where that septic is laying.
So this is the garage right under the SQ, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, and is the septic right behind it?
Yes, can I approach this?
Yeah, please do.
Might be easier to. Septic
Yep.
Part of the field kind of goes out into the septic, or into this building envelope here. So without disturbing the septic tank, we wouldn't really be able to come this way at all. And it's a mound system, and, you know, I don't, not a professional at this, but I don't see that we could go this way at all without disturbing the mound.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The dwelling or structures need to be 20 feet from the absorption area of the drain field and 10 feet from the tank. The septic systems have slightly different setbacks than the home. They only need to be 10 feet from the 10 feet from the road, whereas the building needs to be 30.
Got it.
So what I'm showing you is the building envelope. The septic could come 20 feet this way.
Okay.
Okay.
Understood. And then when you change the impervious surface calculation, so you were taking out is that pavement? Is that what it is?
Yes, there's essentially pavement that goes from the street all the way down to the lake.
Right.
Which, you know, creates a boat access. So we're proposing to, if you can see where the boat lift is there.
Yep.
We'd come back from the lake, you know, just maybe 10, 15 feet or so, just enough to get traction if you're bringing the boat. But we would essentially remove the rest of the driveway back to where the garage is. So it's 75 feet by 12 and a half feet wide of pavement that we take out. So 930 some feet of pavement we take out, replace with grass and some plantings as practical. And so that would increase our pervious surface, and then, if that's a word. And as a practical matter, that's only used, you know,
So was
times
it,
a year anyhow.
so it was 10,
12 and a half feet wide by 75 feet.
yep. And then how much are you leaving? 12 and a half feet wide by,
12 and a half by about 15 feet from the lake, which is existing, but gives some room for traction if you're backing in there.
And then from the road to the garage also?
We would cut it off just slightly past the garage or the driveway.
okay.
So about half the blacktop would go. Again, you gotta be able to get from your road to your garage.
And
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, regardless if that's paved or not, if that is the driveway, that's always gonna count as impervious surface because it's driven on. So their driveway, there's going to have to be a portion of their driveway from the road, at least to the garage.
Yeah.
That's gonna always be impervious surface because that's what it's utilized for.
But right. And I was thinking, so if they remove the pavement and they're planting grass there, which then if you drive on it 2 times a year, obviously that's not a thing.
It's gonna
But
get compacted.
right, if you're gonna leave, why leave the extra 15 feet with the public access literally on the other side of the bay for 187 square feet, which then brings you even closer to the 25% impervious surface?
So I'd like to address that.
Please do.
The bank there is a kind of a natural bank. It's fairly steep. It's about 5 feet high. The boat lift is heavy. There's a raft there in the summertime. That's heavy. And so the boat landing, you know, is what I'll call kind of level. So when you get to be our age, okay, it's a little bit easier to what I call lift something onto level surface rather than necessarily up a 5 feet bank full of rocks. So we're also hoping to kind of put it there so it doesn't sink into the ground over the wintertime.
Thanks for the explanation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Marv?
So I had mentioned to you when we were out there about possibly coming up with a plan to divert that water rather than going directly towards the lake and creating, you know, when you get heavy rains, you're going to have leaves, you're going to have branches, you're going to have twigs, you're going to have all that garbage going directly to the lake with that way it is. Did you come up with a plan?
As a small preface to this note that I sent to the administrator today, I did address a small berm of, I think I addressed about 4 to 6 inches. Oh, we have the note in front of you.
The note says small berm to route water runoff to rain garden. So this is the area that they're proposing to remove of the driveway. And then with this note here.
Okay. And,
Somewhat rudimentary, but
yep, and I think if we would approve this, we would probably have to have a condition with stormwater plan, whatever going through it, that's if. And anyhow, I was wondering on that, and also, you have that retaining wall between you and the neighbors that stands up quite tall. It's impervious surface like that too, and have you thought of possibly doing something with that? And that really stands up quite tall where most of them are level with the grass surface and it's beyond it. And
So I'd like to address that, okay? That will come down, again, to probably at least half that height. Again, there's a bank between me and Tim's house where you saw the retaining wall. But again, those blocks were around the house, and so we just stored them there. So they're gonna be, used on the property, and that wall won't be anywhere near as tall as it is now.
okay, so these were stacked on top of that because it looks like they were placed that way for some time when you're by the lake area.
Yeah, Mr.
Well-
Chair?
We're talking about the retaining wall, right?
Yeah, that one, I think I remember asking if that was going to come down, and the answer was no, it was going to stay there.
No, again, those blocks will be used on the rest of the property once it gets rebuilt. I simply stacked them there to put them someplace.
and unfortunately, we don't have a picture of it, but there's discoloration. There's, the ones that come up above the grass were put there fairly recently after the house was torn down. And they were actually around the house. So why they were put there, for storage, maybe wasn't a great idea, but
So
that's where
is-
they are right now.
is your
So-
impervious
I
So-
distinctly
so the-
remember the question being asked, and I heard the answer, yes, we're not going to do anything with those blocks. They're going to stay where they are, but that's changing.
Again, some of them will be taken down, sir, but there's a substantial bank, and so those retaining blocks were there for a purpose, so that Tim's yard didn't wash into my yard. They were structural.
So, Mr.
So
Chair?
we'll just say that half of them will be.
Miss
taken
Amy, go
down.
ahead.
So, if those blocks are going to be reallocated somewhere else, has your impervious surface calc accounted for wherever else you're going to be using that block?
I think the answer would be no on that.
Okay, so we're looking at maybe a higher impervious surface calc if we're going to be reusing that block somewhere else?
So I even got a place to use them somewhere else, off the property side. And I hadn't thought about that before, but, they might be more useful someplace else. Because the old house was kind of up in the air, and again, they formed what I'll call kind of a natural berm, if you will, around the foundation of the house and the rest of the property.
So they're off the property now?
I could take them off,
Okay,
some of them, half.
okay.
So I'd like to mention something about, you say, stormwater coming down that boat ramp. Okay, so in between my property and Tim's, the one where we've been talking about with the retaining wall, there's a drainage ditch underground. It comes from the road, Lowry Circle. It's probably been there for years. So anything and everything from Lowry Circle can wash into that drainage ditch right down into the lake. There's an open gutter in between my property and Tim's. Comes right from Lowry Circle. Leaves, twigs, branches, dirt, whatever. It's underground. The city put it there, the county.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Different question, moving on. I'm trying to understand the footprint of the new proposed structure is planned to be 63 feet from the lake, but then 10 feet waterway forward is where you propose to put a 10-foot deck on the front?
That is correct, yes,
So that would be 53 feet from the water?
correct.
Okay. Thank you.
What were you going to say? All good.
Mr. Chair?
Clint?
Okay, I'm looking at the building envelope and that, did you give any thoughts to having the new house turned a different way to be farther away from the lake? Could you allude to that just a little bit?
Yes, we did. It relates to how it would connect up to the garage, and it would create kind of a large wall covering up a lot of the house. It would get us back further into the existing envelope. But from a design standpoint, our objective was to try and essentially replace the house that was there before, which was positioned as this one is. And, we did bring it back about 10 feet or so, do that. But yes, the consideration was made. We looked at some different house designs, and each of them didn't get to the point of trying to replace what we had there.
So you'd be substantially, if you moved your house widthways, you'd be substantially cutting off that property. It's only 100 square feet. And so if you have a long house going widthways, you're kind of cutting off the access between the front and backyard, the lakeside and the roadside.
Well, I'm just looking for a way that, your house burnt down, you had the right to rebuild it, missed that opportunity, I'd be fine for that too. But now you're trying to double the living size. So by doubling the living size, to me, that mitigates what you had there. You're doing something totally different. You say you're rebuilding a house, you're not rebuilding, you're doubling it. Going under the garage and all that. So when I look at, I ain't gonna get in the weeds, but you either got to decide what you can do. If you're gonna cut off something, or that's your guys' decision. But it's just hard for us to look at when you're too close to the lake and you want to double. That's the problem with it. So that's why I asked that question. That's your guys' decision to decide which way you want to build your house and how you want to. This is the proposal you give us. But I just got a hard time when you're 20 feet too close to the lake and you're doubling the size, So that's why I asked that question.
So if I can speak to that, the new house would be in line with the other houses. Again, they're all lined up, their front walls, okay? The old house was a little bit closer. And again, the reason why it seems like you're doubling is because you're putting stuff underground. Okay? We're taking out a shed, okay? We're decreasing the driveway. Again, there's only so much storage, so I'm trying to put our storage, what I'll call underground, rather than another ugly shed on the property. The reason why we didn't rebuild it is because I was shorted about $1,000 from my insurance company. I insured it at 2018 values. They never changed that. When it burned down in 2022, I got estimates to rebuild it, and they said, too bad. You're still insured for 2018 rates. So that's why I missed that deadline.
Yep.
Again, $100,000 is a lot of dough.
No, it is, yep.
Mr. Chair,
Marv?
so I'm sitting up here and we got ordinances and things we got to follow here. And you got to try to get as close as that 25% as possible of impervious surface. And you did some things, but you talked about storage area. You have a couple of sheds there and in the side there to kind of stand out in the neighborhood. It's a nicer neighborhood without a question about it. Two things I look at it. First, you're going to get up. I don't know if this is modular home or how fancy or this. There's some nicer homes, and one of these questions is how it will fit in the neighborhood. Will a stick built, if it was architecturally designed to fit in it, would obviously fit much better in it. We got pictures here, but it's just pictures. The other part, I look at it this way. Here you talked about storage underneath like that, and you insist on keeping this other sheds like that. If you remove that, you can lower your impervious surface. And there is a building envelope, and here we're we're trying to find that practical difficulty. And without, finding the practical difficulty, I get what you want to do, lining it up neighborhood, but then the other part is, look at it, you shift it away, you have a nice, beautiful lawn where you can sit down and enjoy the lake from that side of it, the way others would look from the outside of the box looking in. And that's, I have to be up here and looking at the other side of it too. Just let you know where I'm coming from here too.
Again, if you're gonna have a garage, you have to keep it a certain amount of setback. Our director says from that septic system. So you can't really take the garage and move it any farther back towards the septic system. That make sense to you?
Well, actually, technically, you can, because you dig your septic up and you'd move that back to the road, but we established that earlier in the meeting. You don't have to be 10 feet from the road with your septic.
So my septic system covers basically the whole front yard. Okay, it really does. Okay, Tim's, the guy that we're talking about with the retaining wall, his is on the side of his yard. His mound seems to be nowhere as big as mine. And so again, that septic system, that mound, the raised soil, covers pretty much that whole thing.
Mr. Chair?
Brent?
Amy, could you switch back to that previous building envelope slide? I was curious about some measurements there in square footage. Do you know what the front lot width and the back lot width measurement is? I know we're 30.95 from the lot and 75 from the water's edge, or high water mark, but, and then 10 feet sidelines, but what is the two measurements? And that building envelope, just for clarification, is 6,879 square feet?
Yeah. I'm gonna pull up Beacon.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to know how wide this is? Is that what you're asking?
I wanted to know what the width of the building envelope was on the back side and the lake side.
Got it. So I can tell you that I'm just going to measure here.
And maybe just take 20 off for the
Yep.
210 setbacks?
So 60 feet wide, approximately.
Okay.
Because it's going to be 10 from each side. You want to know on the lake side as well?
Well, further up, it's not going to be much more than that, I suppose, in the building envelope, maybe another 5 feet,
Yeah.
3 feet. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so we're looking at about 60 feet wide.
Of width, correct. Yes.
Okay. And then a follow-up question to that. I don't know, maybe I missed it in my read over, but do we know when, prior to the fire, was this a conforming structure as it laid out on the property or non-conforming?
I believe it was built before land use controls. Let me just double check it. Give me just one moment to pull up the slide that would tell me. So the original structure was built in 1972, which would have not been subject to that 75-foot setback. And then the 1997 more than likely was allowed with the 50% rule. That was still in effect, where you could, without a variance, add on at least 50%. So that is more than likely how that got there.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, board members?
Want to open it up to the public?
I am. So we're going to open up to the audience for comment, for or against. I'll ask 3 times. Please stand at the podium there. State your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Tom Wingard. Our lake place is 4016 Lakeview Drive. We're about 8 places down from the place we're talking about. And about 10 years ago, I got a variance to put a porch on my roadside on my cabin that I had bought. So I'm very familiar with what going through this process. We did have to put a 10-foot buffer on the lakeside and add shrubs, and it's still there. And I don't see any of that with this proposal where they're having to put a buffer in. And then 3 doors down, farther down, they tore down their cabin and moved it back 75 feet so they didn't have to do any variances. And I think this is what they should be doing too, is get it 75 feet away from the lake, and then they can do whatever they want, because I think what they're proposing with 4,000 square feet, it's gonna be a huge, probably the biggest place in that whole circle there. And so I'm opposed to really what they're doing there. And then thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Any other public comment? This portion of the meeting is closed to the public.
Can I address this concern, sir?
Not at this time. We're going to go back to any other questions or comments from the boards before we go to the voting sheets.
Mr. Chair,
Clint?
just to help clarify this, there is a little plan for a garden in the front, water garden on this one. Just to go with that.
Thank you, Clint.
Mr. Chair?
Marv?
I wanted to make a comment, and I don't know if they understand this here. Once, as was pointed out, a public comment at the neighbor over there, about once you get a variance, and then if you ever want to do anything, you're going to be right back here asking again. And you have the opportunity to have this place where you will not have to do that. You want to do anything to that, you would not have to keep on going. It just go over the counter. That's huge. And that makes that piece of property worth that much more too, just for you to know that.
Thank you, Marv. Okay, we're going to move on to the voting sheets here and the questions. Number 1, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Brent?
I'm going to have to say no at this point. Part of what we're trying to protect here is the shore impact zone, the setback from the high water mark and the shoreline, surface water drain off back into the way that lot slopes down, and the impervious surface. I don't believe that we're in harmony with the general purposes of the land use ordinance or comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Brent. Anybody else? On to number 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? Clint?
Well, they had a cabin that burnt down and could rebuild exactly where the cabin burnt down, if it would have been done in a timely fashion. It didn't work out that way. What they're asking now is to rebuild, but then add 2,000 square feet. And I think that putting a dwelling and adding 2,000 square feet would be reasonable to this property if it would be in the building envelope. It's not in the building envelope, so I would say that that is not reasonable.
Thank you, Clint. Anybody else? Number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? That goes to me. I believe it would. You look at the shoreline up and down there. You have houses that are close to the water, not close to the water, taller than others, shorter than others. Some have buffers, some don't have buffers, riprap up and down. With this variance, it would maintain the essential character of the locality. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, as I pointed out earlier, I'm wondering, a modular or prefab home being brought in versus a stick-built one that fit in the neighborhood. I think it would change the essential character, but I mean, where they're proposing putting it in line with the others would maintain it, so it's kind of a wash in that respect, but I wanted to bring that forward.
Thank you, Marv. Anybody else? Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Marv?
Well, what I read under practical difficulty is the septic system. And we were up here trying to digest and look at that. And I think we do not see that as a practical difficulty. They were in the process of getting a test. We don't even know for sure if that passes inspection. It's new enough where it probably does, but we're making some assumptions. And they have an opportunity to move it closer where there's still so many vague areas here that I don't believe the septic system can be used as the practical difficulty, and I don't see any other practical difficulties at this time.
Anybody else? Number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowners or prior landowners? Brent?
I'm just going to throw this out here. I mean, it's unfortunate that a fire has occurred there and you need to rebuild, although that's created by something other than the landowner or prior landowners, but we're talking about the variance that's requested here today, and that variance is to build something larger than that which was there, and to restore that. So I think that's created by the landowner and not by anybody else.
Thank you, Brent. Anybody else? Okay, question number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Clint?
Yeah, I think it does. You know, they're not trying to go the cheapest route here, that's for sure. Adding extra livable space and all that's gonna cost more by putting it in. Maybe you can look at it if you shift it to meet, to kind of sit in that building envelope, it maybe would add a little extra cost as far as putting a wall to hook to it. You know, I don't know if we even established a practical difficulty, but I think there is more than just that. But you could say that it is all about economic consideration. I don't believe it is. I mean, they're trying to get more room. Yes, it's a want. It's not a need. It's a want. They want more room, but I think there's more involved here than just the economics of it.
Mr. Chair.
Marv?
As I brought forward to them earlier, I wish they would have brought something forward more with lowering the impervious surface, coming up with a better storm plan. I just, sure, they thought about more than economics, but, you know, bringing a prefab is, you know, watching dollars, but they're thinking about a few things, but I think they could have brought a lot more to the table, so I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Marv. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the vote. Ready? Yep, I'm ready. All right. Question number 1, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Brent?
No.
Clint?
No.
Myself is yes. Marv?
No.
Question number 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by land use ordinance? Clint?
No.
Myself is no. Marv?
No.
Brent?
No.
Question 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Myself is yes. Marv?
I believe it's a yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Question 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Marv?
No.
Brent?
No.
Clint?
No.
Myself is no. Question 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Brent?
No.
Clint?
No.
Myself is no. Marv?
No.
Does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Clint?
I'd have to say yes on that.
Myself is yes. Marv?
I'll put yes.
Brent?
I'll say no.
Questions I've been answered, 4 to 6, no to yes. Based on this, do I have a motion to deny the application?
Mr. Chair, I'd make that motion.
Motion was made by Brent,
I'd second.
seconded by Clint. All in favor, say nay? Or aye, sorry. Yeah, I got it. Marv?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
Clint?
Aye.
John, myself is aye. Based on these findings and the criteria stated in Minnesota Statute 394.27, a motion was made to deny, or a motion was made by Clint, Brent, seconded by Clint to deny the requested variance. Your application has been denied at this time. You are now free to leave the meeting if you wish.
Can I say something?
Not at this time, sir. We are moving on to the second part of our, or the last part of our meeting, which is new business.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any new business for you,
Old business?
and I don't have any of that either.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve our January 30th minutes.
Do I got a second?
I'll second it.
Motion made and second to approve the January 30th minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Right, I think at this time, then you can ask for a motion.
To adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Meeting adjourned.